It's March 8, 2014. Kuala Lumpur's air traffic control is in the middle of a routine transmission with a Boeing 777 that's on its way to Beijing. This is a standard handoff, just passing the flight to the next airspace. But what no one knew at the time was that this communication would be the very last.
Those were the last words ever heard from Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. After that, there wasn't a distress call, no report of an emergency, no sound of an explosion. What followed was just a profound, unsettling silence. The plane simply went quiet.
You know, the flight itself began as normally as any other. It was Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777. It took off from Kuala Lumpur just after midnight at 12:41 a.m., headed for Beijing. A simple overnight flight.
On board were 239 people. That's 227 passengers and 12 crew members. For all of their families, this was just another flight, another night.
The flight plan was completely standard. The aircraft, a 777, is one of the most reliable ever made, and the weather was clear. For the first 38 minutes of its journey, everything about this flight was unremarkable.
So, planes have a system called ACARS. Think of it as a way for the aircraft to send short, automated text messages about its health back to the airline. At 1:07 a.m., MH370's ACARS sent its final scheduled report. The data showed everything was functioning perfectly. Then, at 1:19 a.m., Kuala Lumpur ATC gave the instruction to contact air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh. The reply from the cockpit was calm. "Good night, Malaysian 370. But it was also incomplete. You see, standard procedure is to read back the new frequency. They didn't. And they never made that call to Vietnam.
And this right here, this is the heart of the mystery. In modern aviation, an aircraft is almost never out of contact. So for MH370 to fail to check in with Vietnamese control, that 17-minute silence wasn't just strange, it was a fundamental breakdown of the entire system. A silent window had just opened.
Just 2 minutes after those last words were spoken, at 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts its identity and altitude, it just shut off. To civilian radar, MH370 vanished. But on military radar screens, a new, unidentified blip appeared, and it wasn't flying toward Beijing. The military watched as this blip made a series of sharp, deliberate turns, flying back west across the Malay Peninsula. The last time they saw it was at 2:22 a.m. over the Strait of Malacca, heading out into the vast, open expanse of the Indian Ocean. And this is absolutely crucial. The official investigation looked at that radar data and concluded that the turn wasn't because of some mechanical failure or an autopilot glitch. Someone was physically flying the aircraft, intentionally steering it way off course.
So the obvious question is, why didn't the Air Force do something? Well, because the flight originated from Kuala Lumpur, the radar operator simply marked the blip as friendly, just assuming it was a plane turning back with some technical problem. No jets were scrambled, no one even tried to make contact.
The evidence for a deliberate act becomes even clearer when you look at the communication systems. It wasn't just the transponder that went silent at 1:21 a.m. The AKRS system, which sends those health reports, also stopped transmitting. These systems didn't fail, they were turned off. With the plane's main communication lines dead, the trail should have gone cold right there. But there was one last piece of technology that was still listening. A satellite in a fixed orbit high above the Indian Ocean. A satellite, operated by a company called Inmarsat, registered 7 automated handshakes from the aircraft. These are just hourly automatic pings, confirming that the plane's satellite communication system was still powered on. And they kept coming for hours after the plane had disappeared. Now, these pings didn't have any GPS data in them, but investigators were able to analyze the time it took the signals to travel between the plane and the satellite. And from that, they could calculate the plane's distance from the satellite, which gave them these enormous arcs of possible locations for each hour the plane was in the air. The 7th and final ping was logged at 8:19 in the morning, more than 7 hours after that last good night. Investigators believe this final partial signal was sent at the exact moment the plane ran out of fuel and its engines flamed out. Using this Inmarsat data, a new search area was defined in the remote southern Indian Ocean. We're talking about one of the deepest, most treacherous stretches of water on the entire planet. The hunt for MH370 was about to become the largest and most expensive search in aviation history. For over a year, there was nothing. And then, the first piece of physical proof washed up on a beach. A flaperon, which is a part of the wing,
was discovered on Reunion Island, thousands of miles from the search zone. Since then, other small pieces have been found along the coast of Africa, carried there by the ocean currents.
But the things that would actually tell us what happened, the main wreckage, the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder, are still missing. Without those black boxes, the final hours inside that cockpit remain a total mystery.
And the search has continued, on and off. In 2018, a private company called Ocean Infinity launched its own search on a no-find, no-fee agreement. They used advanced underwater drones to map over 100,000 square kilometers of the seabed, and they found nothing.
And so this isn't a ghost story. MH370 is an active case file. It's an enormous puzzle, and almost all of the critical pieces are still resting somewhere on the ocean floor.
The final official report from the investigation is incredibly direct in its conclusion. They simply do not know what happened. After years of work, without the wreckage, the cause is officially listed as undetermined.
It all comes back to the same questions that have defined this case from the very first day. What exactly took place during that 17-minute gap? And whose voice was it that calmly said goodnight, just moments before steering the plane towards the unknown?
The official search has been suspended and restarted more than once, but for the families of the 239 people who were on board, the search for answers has never stopped. And somewhere out there, the truth is still waiting to be found.